Welcome to the official Colts podcast. I'm Jeffrey Gorman, joined week in and week out from Colts.com, Colts senior writer. This is JJ Stankevitz and, of course, Miss Larra Overton. These two do it all when it comes to following the Colts and the latest updates, and we've got a lot for you today. We're going to look at the in-house free agents, who's going to be back next year, some familiar faces who may not be back next year. But most importantly, the news of this week, it has been announced. Lou Anarumo is the new defensive coordinator for the Colts defense under Shane Steichen. JJ, let me start with you. He came from Cincinnati. This is a gentleman that spent 6 years coaching defensive backs in West Lafayette at Purdue back in the day from 2004 to 2011, and obviously had some great success with that Super Bowl reaching team in 2002 with Cincinnati. Why is this a
2021, right?
2000, what did I say, 2002?
Yeah.
Sorry, 2022, 2021 season. Yeah. Why is this a great hire for this Colts defense?
So let's get this out of the way. The Bengals defense last year was not very good. I think anyone who watched a single Bengals game last year, you know, you probably watching one of those games on Thursday night where they're playing the Ravens and they couldn't stop anyone. That is something that I've kind of had to look at. And okay, why were they maybe not that good? And I think the general thing that I've seen and I've read and I've learned is that defense was a little devoid of talent. Trey Hendrickson's an awesome football player. He had 17.5 sacks in each of the last two seasons. But beyond that, I think they maybe struggled to find guys who were, above average NFL players. I think this Colts defense has more talent, baseline. And look, it doesn't matter how great a defensive coordinator you are. If you don't have talent, it's hard to win. Vic Fangio came into Chicago. Vic Fangio, considered probably the best defensive coordinator of this generation. His first 2 years in Chicago, that defense stunk because they had no talent. And Vic would tell you they had no players. So get Lou Anarumo some more players. I think baseline, that's where I start. Okay, I think you can see more of what we saw out of him when that Bengals defense was rolling in 2021, 2022 than last year. And look, the Bengals have had to invest a lot of money in their offense, in their offensive line, in Joe Burrow, soon to be in Jamar Chase. That means you can't put as much into the defense. And they were not maybe able to replenish some of those vets that really defined, that era of Bengals football. Like they lose Jesse Bates and they never really able to replace him at safety. So that doesn't mean Lou Anarumo just gets a total pass on the whole thing, but I do think that's important context. If you're saying, why'd the Colts hire a defensive guy who just got fired and their defense stunk last year? There's more context here. There's more nuance. It's not as black and white.
Larra, listen, a new defensive coordinator comes in. The general manager and the front office, they know what kind of player that this defensive coordinator wants. And that's a direct, shout out to Chris Ballard working hand in hand with Lou Anarumo as far as what's going to be successful in his defense. And according to Anarumo, he's a DB's coach. It really starts on the backside and kind of works its way up front.
And it kind of feels similar to, hey, you brought in Shane Steichen and you knew he was going to be integral in the selection of the quarterback, the investment you were going to make from the offensive standpoint. I do think that you're going to give a lot of that power to Lou Anarumo in terms of examining who's available in free agency, who's going to be available within the draft, who are players that are, not just going to fit your system, but going to be additions in key areas that are going to help you round out what you're going to try to do. One thing about this particular announcement, though, is the timing of it, I think, is really interesting because it happened so quick. There are a number of really attractive defensive coordinator openings across the league, where a huge shuffle among head coaching positions this offseason. So to me, the fact that a name that is as established, a reputation that's as respected as Lou Anarumo, this is a guy who attracted a lot of interest. So the fact that he's so quickly committed to Indy rather than looking at, hey, what's going to play out in some of these other, franchises, I think that's a huge indication of what he sees in the potential for this defense and immediately, because we know that this is a group that wants to see immediate returns from last season, a huge improvement versus the finish to the 2024 season.
I think it also shows the Colts were aggressive in this.
Yeah.
This to me is a win for the Colts because, there was that report that Ben Johnson was going to consider Lou Anarumo and Dennis Allen to be his DC, and it looks like it might be Dennis Allen in Chicago, but you're getting mentioned with one of the best, or the maybe the top coaching opening in the NFL there of, hey, come and be the DC. a lot of other teams are probably going to be sniffing around this, and for the Colts to get this deal done, I think that is a win for Chris Ballard. That's a win for Shane Steichen. That's a win for this organization to go out and get this thing done now as opposed to waiting, because you never know what might happen. You know, Detroit has an opening. Aaron Glenn goes to maybe the Jets, and all of a sudden...
That's a great job that's right there. Yes.
Dan Campbell had Lou Anarumo as his interim defensive coordinator when he was the interim head coach of the Miami Dolphins. There's stuff here that could have wound up happening that the Colts just said, nope, we're getting this thing done. Lou Anarumo clearly saw a good fit here in Indy, which is another encouraging sign. And I think if we want to talk a little bit about his scheme too, like I love what he did over his 6 years in Cincinnati, just making it really hard on opposing quarterbacks.
I'm going to make 2 points really quickly. One thing I really like about this too is now you have a head coach and a defensive coordinator who have both recently taken teams to Super Bowls. Shane Steichen was an offensive coordinator in Philadelphia. They went to a Super Bowl. Lou Anarumo was a D coordinator that took Cincinnati to a Super Bowl. I love the fact that these guys have a trajectory of getting teams into the playoffs. I think that is going to be a huge asset, and I think that's going to be a great thing too for Shane to work with, right? Like that experience that Lou is going to bring in, bringing some outside philosophies of what he did in different situations, how they structured their teams when they were putting them in a position to make a run and do all of that. And then I was doing a little bit of digging and chatting with my good friend Cynthia Freeland, who is always amazing with like crunching the numbers and the analytics. And this is going to lend itself to some scheme things. One area in which the Colts really struggled last season was second half adjustments, closing out games, right? We kind of saw that. That was the tale of many situations across the 2024 season. In terms of halftime adjustments with Lou Anarumo's defenses, they allowed touchdowns on 54% of opponents' second half red zone drives since 2021, which is the 5th lowest in the NFL.
There we go.
Okay, so he can...
And above all, you want to talk about second half adjustments. He maybe had the best second half adjustment in like NFL playoff history in 2021.
The AFC Championship?
Right. So I pulled up those numbers. So Mahomes in the first half of that game, it's Bengals at Chiefs. Mahomes in the first half goes 18-21 for 220 and 3 touchdowns. He's just shredding that defense. In the second half, and then in overtime, Mahomes went 8 of 18. He had a passer rating of like 30. And what Anarumo did was he dropped 8 guys into coverage. This is like kind of a famous thing around the NFL now, like Lou Anarumo dropping 8 guys into coverage against Mahomes. He dropped 8 players into coverage on 12 snaps in the second half and in overtime. On those plays, Mahomes had a passer rating of, I believe it was like 10.7.
Wow.
He threw 2 picks. He got sacked 4 times, and they couldn't move the ball.
Hold on one second. I'm not doubting what you're saying.
Yeah.
It's interesting as all get out. Why wouldn't they run the ball more? Why wouldn't Mahomes and Andy Reid say, hey, if they're dropping 8 back in this thing, why aren't we just going to pound?
Because they still were, like, the Bengals are still able to defend the run on those plays. Those plays, even though they were dropping 8 guys, it was, they were dropping a spy. They did some cool stuff, like Sam Hubbard had this sack toward the end of the game where it looked like KC was going to go in, score a touchdown, win it. Hubbard gets a sack on 3rd down where he's dropping into as like a spy on Mahomes. Von Bell got an interception on the 3rd play of overtime that wound up helping him win the game. So I looked it up. They ran 12 plays where they dropped 8 into coverage in that second half in OT. No team in the last 5 years has dropped 8 guys into coverage on more than 9 snaps in an entire playoff game.
Wow.
So you want to talk about like a changeup. Jeffrey, that was like Pedro Martinez level changeup right there. It was incredible.
Usage of the nickel, again, I'm drawing upon my girl Cynthia Freeland. Going to have to give her the credit here. She was talking about specifically Mike Hilton, who joined Cincinnati back in 2021.
Awesome player.
He's only one of 2 corners in the league with 60-plus tackles in each of the last 4 seasons.
Can I guess the other one?
Oh, please. I was hoping you would ask.
Kenny Moore II.
There you go.
There it is. Sure tackler.
And Mike Hilton will blitz. Kenny, I think, has a lot of untapped potential as a blitzer in that sense.
You're way in front of me now, JJ.
Okay, all right. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead of the rundown. I'm excited.
Setting this up for you. We know what we had.
We anticipated your game plan, so we made our adjustments.
That's true.
Exactly.
That's true.
Yeah.
But we know what we had. I'm sorry, but we know what we had with Gus Bradley's defense. It wasn't stale. It wasn't this, but I'm going to play you this way. There's not going to be many hooks and ladders and not many different things that are there. It's pretty basic. You know what you're getting. That's not the same with Lou Anarumo. That is not the same because he's been compared to, the old saying, what Belichick would do. Hey, I'm going to take out your best offensive player. I'm going to do whatever, whether it's a running back, wide receiver, tight end. He has those sort of things, My question to you is, before you get into the blitzing and everything, is it going to be a complete 180 from 24 to 25 on the Colts defense as far as the blitz packages go? Because I know it was minimal under Gus Bradley, and with Anarumo, he is not afraid to send somebody, like you said, a 23, a short tackler, like Kenny Moore. Are we going to see more blitzes out of this defense?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think you are going to see more aggressiveness all
so
around.
His numbers, he's not the heaviest blitz guy in the NFL.
Right, you're not going full Wink Martindale.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. He's usually, what I looked up was he's usually somewhere between 18th and 25th in blitz rate, around there. So a little bit below average, but the Colts were usually bottom 3, bottom 5 under Gus Bradley.
Okay.
So it is going to be ratcheted up a little bit more, but what Lou Anarumo does a lot more of is he's always been kind of top 12 in the NFL in the percentages of blitzes that are simulated pressures.
Yeah.
So that's rushing 4, but you don't know who's coming. So you got linebackers walked up, you got a defensive guy dropping, you got a cornerback blitzing. It's more creative. And something he said, this is in an article that was on ESPN that Ben Baby, who covers the Bengals for ESPN, wrote, was that he said you have to change the picture on opposing quarterbacks. When you play elite quarterbacks, you can't just sit back. You have to change the picture, and that right there, that is different than Gus Bradley. Gus Bradley's defense, which he honed over the years, was meant to, we're going to be straightforward and guys are going to play fast. And I think Lou Anarumo's philosophy, to me, seems like we're going to try to change the picture, and we're going to try to create confusion with the opposing quarterback by, you're doing all this funky stuff, you're rotating guys, you're dropping guys. That right there, I think, is more in line with where the NFL has gone over the last maybe 5 years, where you're seeing all this crazy safety rotation. You're seeing, guys look like they're playing man, drop into zone. Just a lot more in terms of disguising stuff, I think you're going to get out of Lou Anarumo, and that goes into how he's going to blitz too.
Can I go even simpler than that?
Yeah, that was too dense.
No. I think for me, just it's a lot of the fundamentals that you feel like that he is going to really hone in on and prioritize, just in terms of, tackling and the discipline, run defense. I'm thinking back, I'm still relatively scarred from the game the Colts played in 2023 in Cincinnati. You allowed Zach Moss, who was having a great year that year. He had 28 yards on 13 carries. They were just assaulting the Colts run game, in and out. And so I think that those are some areas too, the Colts struggled. Tackling wasn't to the standard that it needs to be.
I want to stay there. That's what I was going to bring up to you guys. 7.6 yards per pass play in this past year. That almost led the NFL for the Colts defense, and leading the league in missed tackles. So with this transition coming in, a coordinator, I'm serious. Is it going to be, hey, Saturday morning we're having tackling drills one day before the game type of thing to get this thing right? I know I'm being facetious here, but tackling is a huge problem in this Colts defense as far as this 2024.
Yeah, I think you're going to get back to some fundamentals.
Right. And look, we talk all about, I can talk all about sim pressures and funky coverages. It doesn't matter if you can't tackle. And that is, obviously there's teaching that goes into that, but a lot of that, I've said it on this podcast before, a lot of that's going to be on the players.
Can I ask a silly question? I was thinking about something, and this is just me, and you guys can laugh at me and don't answer. I don't care. But a couple years ago, we said, hey, you got to stop Nico Collins. Kind of a big game coming in your last one of the seasons, right? Yeah. Kind of have to stop that guy. He showed what he did before. First play of the game, this guy's over the top for, you know what I'm saying? Does that sort of stuff get taken away in an Anarumo defense? Right out of the gate when we talked about taking best players out and stuff like that. I know it's a loaded question, but does that play happen in a different defense than we were running at the time?
I think Bengals fans watching this might say, well, that didn't happen for us in 24, where they did get beat a decent amount. They look at that Steelers game; they lost 44-38 or something. But I do think you'll see maybe a little bit more of that, where hey, we're not going to we're going to keep a lid on this.
Yeah,
and also that's what. I don't want to totally disparage Gus Bradley on this podcast, because it wasn't like he was just neglecting Nico Collins out there. It's more just that Houston found a hole and they found a seam, and they were able to hit him in that game in 23. But I think the way that Lou Anarumo will go about trying to take that away will be different in this with this defense that he's going to run as opposed to what Gus Bradley, even what Matt Eberflus was before Gus.
Yeah. And you guys had brought it up earlier. He's beaten good quarterbacks. He's beaten Mahomes. I'm talking about Lou Anarumo. He's beaten Josh Allen.
Yep.
Beaten Lamar Jackson on this thing. So we know when good quarterbacks come in, that this guy's resume has said, hey, and by the way, doing it on a Super Bowl run, too, to knock off some of the great
they allowed
quarterbacks.
20.5 points per game on that Super Bowl run.
Wow.
And that's from wild card weekend into the Super Bowl. So that they were rolling a little bit that year, and that was some of the stuff they were doing with their coverages really was sort of like, okay, this is maybe the new way of doing things, but it goes back to Lou Anarumo has been coaching defensive backs since the 90s when he was at Harvard. So
he was at Harvard.
He was at Harvard,
yeah.
yeah.
Good pull.
So he's got a lot of experience. I think he knows how to coach every single scheme. He'll deploy every single scheme. This isn't going to be your kind of static cover 1, cover 2. We'll maybe mix in a little quarters here and there. It's going to be 1 week we might play a lot of quarters. 1 week we might play a lot of man. The next week we maybe go into a cover 3 where we drop a safety down because we got to stop the run. It's going to be very based on the opponent, kind of like to your point there.
And you had mentioned something earlier about this guy might throw some spy stuff in there. You know, when you're dropping 8, like he talked about what he did in a second half with Patrick Mahomes' duel. That's the sort of thing I'm looking forward to. It's a little bit of tinkering. They called him the mad scientist for a reason there, and I think that's what he's saying. What I read about him is that he wants to use the skill set of the players that he has in his locker room to the advantage, whatever that is, put them in a good position, which reminds me of something like this. What I want to get into. We're going to get into free agents. You've got a guy like Jalen Jones back there. You've got a guy like Juju Brents back there. They are huge in my eyes. Those guys are huge defensive backs.
Yeah.
Big guys, long reach.
Rangy.
Speed is there, but speed not speed merchants and stuff. Do those type of athletes fit into a Lou Anarumo sort of a defense? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think if you're Lou, you're like salivating with the development you can get out of those guys, because even as much as we have seen, I mean, Jalen has been spectacular in his first 2 seasons, but you probably feel like you still have so much untapped there to continue to develop him as a 7th round draft pick who now has had a wealth of experience, has hardly missed any time at all. I mean, maybe a handful of snaps in his first 2 years in the league. Like, he's gotten great experience, and now we can fine tune some of these things. And then you have someone like Brents with tremendous upside, just got to get healthy. But my goodness, the times he's been on the field, some of the plays that he has, provided for you. I'm just thinking specifically about, the Baltimore game, the forced fumble, right, that he had in that, like some of those type of takeaway situations. I think you got to be looking at those guys like, oh man, plus you've got Kenny Moore, like that group in general, an athlete like a Nick Cross. I think you're looking at, man, these, all of these guys have really have put great tape out there. Now let's take it up a notch.
Right.
How are all of these things working in complement with maybe how I can scheme things to support them, how we can develop them in these situations to even find a higher and higher ceiling to
I think,
each of those players.
I think Shane Steichen, when he came in, he very much was how can I fit an offense to the players I have, not how do I fit players to my offense.
Right.
And I think Lou Anarumo is probably more on that side of how can I fit a defense to my players. If you look at what he did in Cincinnati, I just pulled over the last 3 years, he's not higher than 9th or 8th, excuse me. He's not higher than 8th in any single coverage in terms of rates that he played it. So they played cover 0, they played cover 1, they played cover 2, cover 3, cover 4, cover 6. I mean, they did literally everything. So he's got the full menu there. So if he gets in here and he says, maybe we're a really good cover 2 team. Okay, let's lean into playing maybe a little bit more a cover 2. He's coached it before. He knows how to coach it. Maybe we're a really good, maybe we've got like the guys to play cover 6 quite a bit, quarter, half. Okay, let's go lean into that. Maybe we really do need to be kind of cover 1, cover 3, but maybe let's just dial down some of those rates a little bit. I think he can do kind of whatever he feels like is the best route in terms of coverage for these guys. And that, I think, right there just gives you a ton of confidence in what he can do with a Jalen Jones, a Juju Brents, a Kenny Moore II, Nick Cross, those guys.
And with a group that has so much prided itself on taking the ball away, I'm looking to this right here, they forced 1.5 turnovers on average per game from 23 to 24, which was tied for 6th in the NFL.
Yeah.
And I would say not even with as much talent as you currently have, right? When you just look, kind of par for par, position by position. So, yeah, I think that is really going to be, a nice fit, a nice marriage with, the talent that you have, what you have seen, what they've produced thus far, and then also that scheme and the resume that he brings in.
Give me the stats again with Trey Hendrickson. Remember you did that a little minute ago?
Yeah,
There's
all
a
right.
reason on this. All he did was get in the backfield. All he did was get after the quarterback when he's in Cincinnati. Trey Hendrickson, okay?
Yep.
What'd you have him at, 17 and a half?
17 and a half sacks in each of the last 2 years. This year he was a first-team AP All-Pro. He led the NFL with those 17 and a half sacks.
So we saw what he did in Cincinnati. Who is that guy? Who is that guy? Who's our Trey Hendrickson? Who will Lou Anarumo?
Wow.
And I know that's
all right. Well, I think you'd like it to be Latu.
Latu, right?
Yeah.
That's going to get those 12 to 15 sacks in a year.
But
something
okay,
like
but
that.
here's the thing. Trey Hendrickson, it took him 4 years.
That's what I was going to say.
Took him 4 years.
to find his
Yeah,
groove,
he had
right?
6.5 sacks in his 3 years in the NFL, first 3 years with New Orleans. Then he had 13 and a half sacks, signed with the Bengals the next year, and then went 14, 8, 17 and a half, 17 and a half. It just hiring Lou Anarumo is not going to wave pixie dust on Laiatu Latu and turn him into Trey Hendrickson. But I do think hopefully you see some more gains. I think you saw good things from Latu. Where the Colts defense really struggled last year was they allowed so many quick passes of just get the ball out and Latu would beat the guy in front of him and the ball would be whizzing by his ear because, teams knew, hey, let's just get this ball out quick because the Colts are going to struggle to tackle. And you also saw a lot of 6-man protections where you have a tight end, you have a running back, whatever, staying home to basically just say, if you're going to rush 4, you're not going to get home against this. There's no shot. So that's where if teams are going to keep doing that, which they probably won't against a Lou Anarumo defense, but if they do, okay, how do we attack this differently? I think you saw Gus Bradley try to sprinkle some new stuff in with sim pressures this year, but the Colts were still near the bottom of the NFL in sim pressure rate and in blitz rate. You might be bottom 15, bottom half of the league with Lou Anarumo, but I do think those blitzes are going to be a little bit different in how they look. And, Gus Bradley never really was a cover zero guy.
Right.
Lou Anarumo will sprinkle in some cover zero, some all-out blitzes.
There will be some mad scientists at work. Can I just ask you, what would you like to see, Larra? I mean, what would you like to see overall, the main thing that Lou Anarumo brings into this defense that we have been lacking for the last couple of years?
I think it's just kind of an overall intensity, urgency, from
that.
a tone. Just setting that tone is really what I'm like. And that's something, and the reason I kind of go that way is because that's something that you can gauge early on, even before you get into training camp and all of those periods. Really, as guys kind of start coming back in for some of the OTAs, mini camp, and all that, that's where you can see some of that established, where you're maximizing a lot of that just in terms of what you're implementing, what the expectation is, and how guys are responding to it as well.
What do you think? What do you think overall? Just the biggest difference from this Gus Bradley-led defense that we've seen the last couple of years to this Lou Anarumo defense. The biggest difference that you'd like to see?
It's just going to be less static. You're going to see more of the picture changing on the back end more consistently. And I don't. Gus Bradley did do some of that.
Sure.
It wasn't like he was just, we're playing Hawk 3 and that's it. He did do some things that were different. He did change stuff up. But Lou Anarumo, I think, will crank that to a different level in terms of the different coverages you'll see, how he disguises them, just to try to make, because the goal is you're trying to make the quarterback hitch with throwing something different at them, changing the picture post-snap. I think you have a defense, to Larra's point, that really does pride itself on taking the ball away. You've got guys who we've seen take the ball away. You get that quarterback to hitch, all of a sudden, I think, you might see some real big numbers out of a guy like Kenny, where he could be a real impact guy, I think, in this defense. You brought up Mike Hilton, Larra. Mike Hilton was a really good player on those Bengals defenses a couple of years ago. I could see Kenny. We know he's a really good player. I could see Kenny having a couple really good years here with Lou Anarumo if things go well.
Can't wait. He does have some talent back there. And I'll tell you what, we are going to talk about some talent now. Obviously, we'll have the latest with Lou Anarumo. And by the way, these two will be speaking with the defensive coordinator in the upcoming days. Colts.com will carry it, and all social medias that you follow your Colts on, they'll have it as well. So look for JJ and Larra to be sitting down with Coach Lou Anarumo and going over some of his defensive philosophies. And some of the questions that you're hearing right there, they will ask the defensive coordinator as well. So, guys, now I kind of wanted to get into the free agency of the in-house free agents. Who knows what Chris Ballard and company are going to do on the outside stuff, but it's the in-house free agents. But, JJ, I need to start with you. Where are we? I think I know the basic area we're at with salary cap and what we have as far as that $40 million, $44 million I'm getting from Spotrac or whatever it's called, and then I get another one from. So we're in that sort of general ballpark. Do you see that as the same total as far as availability when it comes to salary cap a couple of months from now? And if not, what will change that figure?
Usually what changes that figure, you have guys who could be released. The Colts traditionally haven't done a ton of that. What usually, like, you kind of have to keep in mind with that salary cap figure is like, okay, this guy's due for an extension coming down the pike, right? The Colts don't have a ton of that right now. I don't know if you have a guy like in previous years with like Quentin Nelson, right?
Yeah.
Who's just, they got DeForest Buckner and Zaire Franklin done last offseason. It's like, I don't know if you have that guy who's like screaming, like coming down the pike.
Yeah.
I think Bernard Ryman might be the closest on that. But usually sometimes it's like, okay, you have this figure, but you got to set some of it away because you need to get this guy done or whatever it might be. So that part of it is going to be interesting in how that might impact the Colts spending this offseason and how aggressive they get if they say, maybe we need to get something done with a couple guys next year.
Yeah.
But for right now, let's just maybe that is a change with it. Because in previous years, it's the Colts aren't spending in free agency. Well, it's because they were taking care of their own guys. And maybe you don't have as many of those guys who you're like circling of like, we cannot afford to lose this guy. So maybe that leads to a different strategy. I don't know. We'll see.
We'll see. And definitely going to lead to a different looking locker room. It just is what it is. The NFL from one season to the next, new faces change. Guys, I'm going to start here. This is going to be a fun little exercise. It's touchy. It's a slippery slope because some of these players we love. We want them to stay in the building and be Colts for the rest of their career, but it just doesn't happen in the NFL. So I want to go over some of these in-house free agents with you, and I'll start with you, Larra, about what they bring to the team, what they would bring to the team next year, and understand that we possibly could lose these to another franchise. I want to start off right with, we're talking defense with Lou Anarumo. Let's talk with E.J. Speed first and foremost right there, a guy who's up like that and a guy who's been a wingman for Zaire Franklin for a couple of years now. Start there. There's a possibility we lose E.J. Speed.
Man, and that dynamic with that linebacker group is always just so fun. And when, another guy, you talk about development, he was pretty raw, but the Colts, saw something in him early on in that draft process that they invested in and then, continued to invest in him. There's an energy that Zaire and EJ have in complement to one another, like on the field with the way that they play. I mean, when you drafted EJ Speed, whoever would have thought that you wouldn't have, Shaq Leonard in 2024, right? And so I think the role with which he has had to step into and embraced, as you go back to, midway point of the 23 season. I mean, it's significant. Like, we've seen EJ be a playmaker. We've, seen him be able to be versatile, within the defense with the different things that he's been able to do. So, plus he's just so much darn fun to talk to. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
Like,
I think the one thing to keep in mind here is the Colts have in years past kind of replenished that linebacker room. They let Bobby Okereke go. You let Anthony Walker Jr. go. Hey, we've got younger guys coming through. Do the Colts do that again with EJ Speed, where you got a Jalen Carlies on this roster and say maybe we just want to bring him along and not spend as much at that linebacker position. EJ, go get that contract that you deserve, but maybe it just won't be from here. I don't know. We'll see.
We're going to see.
There is a precedent for that. If the Colts go that route.
And one thing to Carlies, I was really impressed that he had the extended, obviously, time away, given, the injury. He, was out, 7 weeks or so?
About that.
Was it?
Right, and came back. And still
came
played
back
well.
and had a career game, like right off of that.
Yeah.
Like I think that was one of the really impressive aspects for me that indicated, the type of pro that he is, the type of player that he is with, seeing that opportunity and making sure. And that's one of the things that in talking to him after that game, he was just saying, like, I wanted to be sure that I could show the guys that they could trust me. If I'm out there, they can trust me to make plays on the field.
All right. Guys, I'm going to throw some more names at you that are up this year. Double dip right here. Julian Blackman, Dayo Odeyingbo. JJ, you're up. What do you think? These guys are on the open market right now, and we saw Julian last year on the open market. Colts went back and signed him for another year.
Yeah, Dayo is going to be an interesting one because the Colts really, really liked him coming out in 2021, right? Like, and they knew this is going to be a process with Dayo Odeyingbo. Coming off that Achilles, it maybe stunted his growth, at least in 2021. And, he took a step back in terms of his production this year, going from, 9 sacks last year to a couple this year. Mm-hmm. So, how much does that play into it? How much does I think for everyone on defense now, it's you got a fresh set of eyes here. You got Lou Anarumo. Hey, you want to keep this guy or not? We'll see with Dayo. He mostly was a rotational guy over his time here, but I do wonder if some team is like, they're looking at his tape in 2023 and saying, yeah, we can work with that. He's 6'6", 286. We liked him in the draft too. I wonder if that might play into it if he were to get another opportunity.
JJ, whether it's here or somewhere else, this young man gets paid. Is that agreed?
Defensive lineman. I mean, look, Samson Ebukam got a pretty good contract from the Colts. His career high in sacks was, I think, 4.5 or 5. And then he went out and said, he almost doubled that with 9.5 and 23. So defensive linemen like Dayo Odeyingbo usually get paid.
Yeah.
They usually get paid.
There's a ferocity in, his play on the field. Every time he's out there, just looked it up, like 31 tackles, including 3 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and a recovered fumble over 17 regular season games. Like, pretty impressive, just like what he has done in the time he has been on the field.
Yeah, I wonder how much him going from 8 sacks to 3 sacks is going to impact it.
Yeah.
Because I think last year you looked at him and, he's got 8 sacks. Like,
JJ,
can he take off here? And then he kind of drops back to 3.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure
he follows up with 8 sacks after 8 sacks the year before.
He's getting
this
a lot
young man
more.
is getting a lot more. You're absolutely right
Right.
on this. Julian Blackman, I got to jump there, the veteran. And we were talking about Lou Anarumo a lot this podcast. He starts from the back working forward, like we talked about. He was loaded with that Super Bowl run that he had, defensive backfield that he had. The safety position and an Anarumo defense, it's huge. It's obviously huge. We saw what he had with Jesse Bates down in Cincinnati. But where does Julian Blackman fit in with his age, his injuries, where he's been? He's been here for more than a few years now. Is that a fit that you could see coming back?
Well, I think you do always value a veteran presence at that position, right? There's something to be said for that, especially a defensive coordinator with that DB type of background. But one of the things that Julian admitted going into, exploring the market last offseason was, the market for safeties wasn't maybe as hot as what he anticipated, or what I should say his agent advised him, or what they explored it to be. So it'll be really interesting with how they approach that particular position. Maybe not necessarily because of Julian himself, but just because of certain trends that you see with different positions like that there wasn't necessarily as much money maybe out there in the pool for the taking among the guys that were available.
The one thing I would say here is Lou Anarumo has valued veteran safeties in the past. Jesse Bates, Von Bell, and when those guys left Cincinnati, that back end maybe struggled a little bit, and maybe that goes into him varying his coverages and stuff. So maybe Julian Blackman, given he's got experience playing both strong and the free, playing some different kinds of coverages there, maybe that, even though it's a new defensive coordinator, I do wonder if that might impact this. And the Colts obviously know, too, what Julian was dealing with the shoulder all year.
Yeah.
So I wonder if that might play into Julian maybe being a guy who does come back off of that defense last year.
Just like you said, that veteran leadership is so important in an NFL locker room and a huddle for that matter.
And I don't necessarily know that you have anyone like it. When you talk about, with the linebacker room, like you obviously drafted Jalen Carlisle. I don't know that you really have an heir apparent.
Yeah, there's not an internal guy. Yeah.
Exactly. And so maybe for, the price point you were able to get Julian last year, if you can find a way to do something similar, this year and, make it a somewhat team-friendly deal could be a really attractive situation.
I do think, too, if whatever the Colts do, if they do get a veteran safety to kind of pair with Nick Cross, that probably wouldn't preclude them from taking a safety in this year's draft.
Yeah, for sure.
However it might look.
Keep an eye on that. Guys, one last name on the defense. I'll flip over to the offense. An important player. I'm sorry, an important player. Grant Stuard, a guy that's a special teams ace. We saw what he did when EJ was out. We saw that Carlisle was out during that time. He goes in, sets a season record, I think it was what it was. He had 19 or 20 total tackles, one on special teams and 19 while playing on the field. So Grant Stuard is up, a guy that they got in a trade a couple years ago from Tampa, and an important guy in the special teams. I can see a guy like that coming back,
Yeah, good depth.
Yeah.
Obviously he's shown it, and a guy who's a special teamer who you trust. I would say, that's a guy you might circle and say you might want to bring that guy back.
And when you hear the stories about him, in practice, they have to dial it back. When you're having to pull the reins back, they love the intensity. Shane Steichen, I remember a few months back doing a 360 episode and asking about just Grant Stuard and his play and his approach. He's like, relentless effort every single time. It's you know how much Shane loves that, and I feel like that. I'm not sure that there's really a guy who kind of embodies that. You could probably pull Dwayne through, but to me, I just have this visual of Grant and the way that he attacks on the field, whether it's on special teams, whether it's on defense. So you feel too that all indications are too. I do think he wants to be back here. He's found a good fit here. He's found a home here, built his family, here, grown his family here. So I do think that, it's for him wanting to find a way to make it work.
But for all those reasons, there are going to be other teams probably interested in
Grant
him. Stuart.
Good call, JJ. You're absolutely right. And by the way, one of the greatest stories in the NFL, look it up. Google it. Do what you have to do. Grant Stuard shouldn't be playing in the NFL, but he is. It's a great story, hopefully a Disney movie. Guys, let's go to the offense. I want to start with one of the captains up front, Ryan Kelly. We saw him play. I said it to the young man a couple of weeks ago. I said, you were off for a month, and all of a sudden you come back and you rush for 335 yards. Is there a connection there? JJ, start with you. Ryan Kelly, what he means to this offense, and I know he's a guy that's going to command a big dollar. This is a guy that's proven it and has been a Pro Bowler and a All-Pro in his day and been a captain for a long time. Ryan Kelly and where we're at, we saw what happened last year in the draft with Tanner Bortolini. Where do you think the Colts are with a veteran like that?
It's a really good question, because the Colts obviously value what Ryan Kelly has brought to this franchise for the last, almost a decade at this point. Ryan Kelly can still play really good football. I think there's value in having a veteran center with a young quarterback like Anthony Richardson. Having said that, you did draft Tanner Bortolini last year, and we saw him have some decent moments when he got in there. So that one is going to be a really interesting one to sort out. I don't have a feel for how it's going to go. I could easily see the logic in either path that the Colts take.
Not surprised if a team says, that's our guy, we want him, give us 2 years, Ryan, and we're happy. Or if he comes back here, you're not surprised either. That's what I am. I just don't think the young man's done playing top quality football.
Yeah.
As far as Ryan Kelly goes. Agree?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go there. This is the fun one. I'm going to the offense here. I'm going to double up on these guys now. We'll get to Will Fries. Don't worry. I know you guys love Will Fries. But the tight end room, Kylan Granson, Mo Alley Cox. We've seen, what have we seen out of our tight ends in the last couple of years?
This one,
I know, but it's like, does Shane Steichen's offense, I guess what I'm trying to ask you, Oath, is there a guy, is it going to be like a Brock Bowers type of a tight end that is going to
I think
fit?
If you have the guy, you
have the guy, then he can be the guy, but you can't make him into something that he's not type thing. So where does that leave us with Granson?
Yeah, if there were Brock Bowers just available all over the place, there's a reason he is, as the season he has.
What do you think?
So I know the production has not just it hasn't been there. There's no way to spin it or sugarcoat it. The production from the tight end room has not been there. There's a world where Mo Alley Cox is a good fit on this football team still for what he does as a run blocker. I don't want to discount that. Now, at the end of the season, he said, he's kind of looking for somewhere he can go that he can win. Maybe that's Indy, maybe that's not. I think Mo is, over his career, he's played quite a bit of football, and he can probably find a place that'll have him, I think.
Absolutely.
Because he is a good run blocker. I know, you say, he gets 7 catches a year, but that's not what his job should be. His job should primarily be a run blocker who's, by the way, really good at it. And I think if the Colts were to bring him back, I know what's going to happen if the Colts bring him back. There's going to be this huge uproar on social media. What are they doing bringing these stinking tight ends back?
You can still draft a guy.
Yeah, right.
You can still draft a guy, but also don't think about Mo Cox as a tight end who should be the next Dallas Goedert.
Right,
Think about Mo Cox as a guy who's a really valuable run blocker on this team who's unselfish.
Hope he doesn't
think
go
about him
anywhere.
that way.
I mean, a good run blocker and a really great red zone threat, too. Like, when you need
He's
him to
proven
be.
it,
But even then, even if he only catches one touchdown, okay,
Yes,
fine.
that's what I'm saying. Is at least the option is there,
Right, the
though.
fourth
You've
down.
got
Right,
it,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like
right,
you can go
Yeah.
to that. You've got that in your arsenal that you
Yeah.
can rely upon when needed.
Guys, Kylan Granson, direct opposite, if you will, in my opinion, of what Mo Cox is, who's a large target, a big man, a blocker. Kylan Granson, also a good blocker. I know as he gets in there. Where does a guy like that fit in this offense as far as, like, Kylan Granson, a veteran who's done it? And JJ, again, we said these guys just didn't get their hands on the ball, but when he did, there's a lot of splash with Kylan.
Yeah, there are also a couple drops in there. I mean, I think about that one in New England. He's a guy who I do know that coaches have really liked him, though. Coaches over the years, from Frank Reich to Jeff Saturday to Shane Steichen, have been like, yeah, this guy's got something. So, wouldn't totally discount that either. But I do think when you look at this tight end room, you can't keep running it back with the same guys.
Yeah, you got to come up with something.
You got to find more production, however you find it, because what the Colts got out of it last year in terms of the passing game, just it wasn't good enough.
And there was
from
no
that room.
secret. They coveted the Brock Bowers, right? I mean, they looked at that guy as an offensive piece.
Oh, I think a lot of teams
a lot of
did.
teams.
Yeah,
a lot of
yeah,
Colts are no
yeah.
different. That
Right.
if they were to get their hands on him last year in the draft, that I think they probably would have went there. So, okay, guys, we talked about Ryan Kelly, the importance of it. I'm going to go to a younger version of Ryan Kelly. Will Fries, a guy who's going to get paid, something like this. We saw the gruesome injury that took him down, but the last 2 years playing some quality football.
God.
And I'd love to see him. I love what he brings to the offense. I love what he brings to the locker room even. Nice young man. But another guy that's going to get paid right there, and there's a lot of dollar bills over the front of that Colts offensive line. Is that somebody that they go and say, hey, whatever it takes, we're going to re-sign Will Fries?
Well, I mean, there's the obvious factor that I think to some degree, whatever he does, it's going to be a little bit of a prove it situation because teams are going to need to gauge where he is coming off of the injury and just, exactly if he is full strength to start the year where he is. So this is a situation in which I think there's a lot of variance, I think, maybe in versus where he was prior to that versus what it might command now. And I can tell you, coaches have had some, time and different things where, they don't necessarily have to be in the building. Tony Sparano's been in the building. I can assure you that as these conversations are happening and exploring these, Tony Sparano is going to make a case for these guys and the roles that they're going to play. And I think he is going to be a pretty heavily weighted voice in terms of these evaluations and what he sees with that group. But yeah, it's an intriguing one. I would like to find a way to get Will back for sure.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting what his market is going to be because, coming off an injury where, the Colts know better than any other team what his timetable is going to be. He's been in the building. He's been working his butt off here. Could that lead to, maybe stick around here?
Because that discount maybe type thing?
Maybe, but I mean, I wouldn't begrudge a guy if he didn't.
No, I understand. Yeah.
I think that's for every free agent.
Yeah, you're right.
But I do think there have been cases where guys have been coming off significant injuries and they hit the market, and you're like, okay, let's see how this goes. And then all of a sudden, I think about when I covered the Bears, Allen Robinson had a little more consistent production prior, but he tore his ACL in 2017. Bears signed him to a big deal that offseason like nothing happened. And if you're a good player, you still can get paid.
Nice year, right?
And Will Fries had a really good year before he got hurt. So that's going to be that one is going to be very interesting. I also selfishly would love to have Will back.
Yeah, right.
I think he's a great football player. He's physical. He's a punisher in there. He's a tone setter.
Gets bigger every time I see him or stand next to him. I'm not kidding you. He's that guy. He's like every time I'm standing next to Will Fries, I'm like, how did you get bigger? You got wider? You got taller? I don't know. Your fingers got longer? Something.
I know. But then it's so funny because he's so massive and imposing, but then he's just this gentle creature.
Little
He's just
teddy bear,
he's just he's very level. He's he's just cool. It's just he's great.
All right, guys. Now buckle up for this one. Here we go. In-house free agents, Sam Ehlinger, Joseph Flacco. What do we do with the quarterback situation?
Yeah.
The reason I'm bringing this up is we heard General Manager Chris Ballard talked about competition. Not just in the quarterback room, all across the field on this roster, but that includes the quarterback position. Guys, let me start with you, JJ. Where do you think we're at with the situation with this quarterback room right now? Because on contract only, we have one quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts right now, and that is Anthony Richardson. He's under contract.
I think you probably are going to see a different backup come in based on what Chris Ballard said. Someone who, Joe Flacco came in to, hey, if we need him to play for Anthony, he can play. From the sounds of it, the Colts are going to bring in someone who can push Anthony and compete with Anthony. I'm not sure either of those guys
JJ, give me a
it.
name, JJ. Come on, give me a name.
I'm not giving you a name.
Give me a name.
I'm not giving.
Not yet?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet. I think, though, if you can read between the lines and you look at who's available in free agency, it won't take you very long to circle a player who's like, yep, that makes a lot of sense.
Might be that guy.
Sam's going to be interesting, though. I think he'd like to have him back, but I don't think anyone in this building would begrudge Sam if he signed with the team to be their backup.
Sure.
That's what I was
Because
just going to
he's probably
say.
looking at a third string again here, but he's a guy who I think he might have some fans around the league.
Yeah.
I was
He's
just going to
smart.
say, I think both
He
guys
can
will have
scoot,
interest
yeah.
from other teams across the league.
Yeah.
I think you will see.
And on Flacco, he can still play good football,
Yeah.
man. I don't
He's
know.
playing somewhere, right? Whether it's here or somewhere
I think
else.
you're seeing Joe throw some passes in 2025 as a 40-year-old.
Yeah.
Absolutely. As a 40-year-old
Yep.
is correct. Don't forget, who knows what happens with another 40-year-old? Isn't Aaron Rodgers going to be on the market soon? Something like that. A couple of 40-year-old
Is he?
quarterbacks looking. I'm just saying if they
Who knows?
move away from them, whatever
yeah.
like that. So
Well, I guess it depends on which direction
which
they
direction
go.
they
as
go. A
head
lot of
coach.
directions we're going to be following this
directions.
offseason. Obviously, it
Lot
starts
of
here.
directions.
I want to thank everyone that's watching on the all our YouTube viewers as well as the Colts Audio Network listening in. Larra Overton, JJ Stankevitz, I'm Jeffrey Gorman. We're bringing you through the in-house free agents and, of course, Lou Anarumo getting up close and personal and meeting the defensive coordinator. Finally, guys, we're going to kind of end with this. A couple of things. I'm going to talk playoffs, but I want to talk Berlin. May I start with you? Berlin was announced last week.
Okay,
Another
God.
German game.
Yeah.
We've had 1 year in Frankfurt, then a year no travel, and then 2025 the Colts will be playing an unnamed opponent in Berlin as the home team. Larry, your thoughts on that?
Cool to have finally a home opportunity. Obviously, the Colts played in London and played in Frankfurt as the visiting team. So now you get an opportunity to put your stamp on that market. And obviously, in Berlin, there's so much history. There, and especially with the venue and all of those things. So, and I mean, we've heard a lot from a lot of international fans, their excitement. I was overwhelmed when we went to Frankfurt at the number of Colts fans who we encountered and who showed up. So it's great to see that when you saw there is this opportunity to build upon some of that momentum from 2 years ago, the Colts so quickly going back, and then also to be able to be the home team, to capitalize on that opportunity, continue to grow and expand that fan base that is already there.
Yeah.
It's already well established. Now you're just going to continue to build upon it. And I know that it's a lot of travel, right? In the middle of the season, there are so many factors at play. I genuinely think the players have enjoyed the experience, those who have gotten the opportunity to do it. When you look back to Frankfurt, and then I think that Berlin is going to be, just another one of those opportunities for them, because it's one of those where I don't know that you ever take it for granted when, Sunday in and Sunday out, you're going to different stadiums and you that's what you're doing. You're living out your childhood dream. But I do think it's different when you go and you drop yourself into a place thousands of miles away and it's all completely new. And it just almost is rejuvenating, I think, to just see that excitement from a, totally different side of the world.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. I mean, I talked with Bjorn Werner last week.
That's right.
For a podcast on instant reaction, and what he said about Berlin being kind of this multicultural city, I know it's got a big art scene. I'm not a big art guy, but I guess I can get into it. Although when I went to Florence on my honeymoon, I literally fell asleep in the Hall of David. So I don't know, maybe it might be lost on me.
Really? How about that?
Yeah, I
Falling
was
asleep.
jet lagged. It was really hot. There was just all this background noise.
What did Betsy do?
punched me in the ribs.
Wake you up.
I had a couple glasses of wine.
Yeah, there we
already
go.
in the
Now it
day,
comes out.
and
The
Not
Chianti.
that many. I had like
Little vino
one
put 'em
or
under.
two at
Chianti was
lunch.
setting in.
But all that just kind of, yeah. So the art part of it might be lost on me.
Hey, it's going to be fun, and obviously there's ticket packages available. Colts.com will have the information if you want to go watch your Colts. Season ticket holders are going to get a chance to go over there as well. And like I said, a couple of big parties pregame that you'll be invited to if you go over there. Anyway, just be patient. More information will be coming about the Colts playing and who they'll be playing in Berlin, Germany. Colts.com has all the latest. Guys, playoff football, I just need some winners right now. I'm going to start with you. Let's start at 3 o'clock. I'm going to say Jaden Daniels taking on Jalen Hurts, and the Eagles with Saquon Barkley. Who do you like coming out of the NFC Championship?
How do you pick against Washington right now?
I know, they're running hot.
I just, it's such a fun story.
Taking the
mean,
rookie?
Yeah, I'm going with the
All
rookie.
right, I'm going to take Philly. I'm going to be
take
that
the
guy.
veterans?
I love what Jane Daniels has done. Man, it's been fun,
Yeah.
but like
The run has to stop, right?
Give me Vic Fangio.
Yeah.
To
At home.
dial something up,
I'm
and
sorry,
it's at home.
too. Some of those Saquon Barkley runs.
Yeah, and
those,
Saquon,
those
yeah.
are like soul destroyers
Exactly.
for a defense to see him
Yeah,
do
I
that,
mean,
right?
I think that's a game where if Washington is not able to get out to a really quick start, and Philly's able to kind of twist the screws defensively on Jaden Daniels, I think it might be not a long night for a long afternoon for Washington, but maybe it's like 24-13, or
Okay.
just something where it's like it's not the highest scoring game, but Philly's got control of it for most of it.
One thing I like about Washington is, like, obviously we talked about, the immediate turnaround from them, but then I also look to, like, it's a team that made an investment in bringing some outside guys in and, focused on getting the right guys, focused on getting a guy like Bobby Wagner, a guy like Austin Eckler.
Yeah.
I mean, there are more. Those
Well,
are just
on the offensive line, they went out and signed a bunch of vets like Nick Allegretti, and all of a sudden their line turns into a good unit.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's kind of one of the factors there that it's like, when you do that, when you have, an approach and a system
It works.
strategy.
It's not about spending the most money; it's about spending it right.
Yeah, tip of the hat to the Washington
Well,
Commanders.
and look at the Eagles too, where their best offseason free agent signing was Zach Bond, who they paid like $1 million to. The guy's an all pro.
What a guy.
Yeah,
I know.
Wow.
yeah.
That thing did work out. That's great. Okay, the showdown. Let's go to it. Buffalo on the road, taking the Chiefs in KC. It's a 6:30 kickoff. It's going to be cold. It'll be snowy. Larry, who do you like? You like Josh Allen? You like Patrick Mahomes?
Toss me through the tabletop right now.
Really?
I'm on the Bills. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. I'll be contrarian here. Trust me, I want the Bills. The team that right now is playing the best football of any team left in the playoffs is the Kansas City Chiefs.
It's going to be tough knocking them off.
They are peaking at the right time.
Yeah.
Travis Kelce, that was a slam dunk that he was going to go for 100 against the
Absolutely.
Texans.
Keep him on the shelf for 17
Exactly.
weeks or 16 weeks, one good game, and then all of a sudden playoffs, he's ready for the Hall
Seriously,
of Fame now.
of the 4 teams that are playing, to me, the Chiefs are playing the best football on both sides of the ball of all 4 of those teams. So we got a rematch of the Super Bowl from a couple of years ago, Chiefs and Eagles. I think that's the one America wants the least.
Is that right? Yeah.
I think most football fans would love to see Bills and Commanders. But
I don't know. Chiefs got a lot out there. I mean,
yeah, okay, that's a good point.
know.
They're pretty popular.
Chiefs have got a good
Most
following.
sickos like me would rather
I know.
see Bills Commanders.
Oh, that would be
but-
fun. MVP Patrick Mahomes going against a rookie quarterback. That'd be kind of cool seeing that up there. Anyway,
That'd be a weird color-scape Super Bowl. You'd have 2 teams with very similar.
oh yeah, that's true. Red
Yeah.
and
Oh,
white
yeah.
on one side
Yeah.
and kind of maroon.
One's
and,
ketchup and mustard, and
Yeah.
and then the other's a little bit more of a maroon.
Maybe a
gold.
Chipotle ketchup and mustard.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
Hey, more Chipotle next week right here on the official Colts podcast. Listen, Colts.com has got you covered with the latest, especially from these two. They're going to be sitting down with Lou Anarumo very shortly. I don't know whether it's today, it could be tomorrow, but it will be available.
rolling
to
those
you.
out.
Yeah, on
Yeah.
social media as well as Colts.com. You will have a chance to get to meet the Colts' new defensive coordinator. That is the biggest storyline going right now. Colts are filling some positions and obviously going to get you ready for the upcoming draft as well. Colts.com has you covered. A big thank you behind the camera today to Kevin Connors for doing this. Larra Overton, Latte Larra in the house today. JJ Stankevitz, appreciate you guys sitting down and talking about it. But we'll have more answers next week because you know what? Lou Anarumo will be in the building right now. We'll have some new talks on who's going to be playing in the Super Bowl, maybe some more Berlin stuff, maybe some new free agent stuff. So, point is, we're here all off season for you. Don't go anywhere. For JJ and Larra, I'm Jeffrey Gorman. We'll talk to you next week.